Onto this story now. The ailing state of our state-owned entities are on the minds of many South Africans. The question is, will it be the top of the agenda for President Cyril Ramaphosa as he delivers his State of the Nation address on Thursday? I'm joined by political analyst Karima Brown for a preview of what we can expect from the President. Karima, I know that your biggest pet project is that of seeing those who were involved in state capture being sent to jail. One of the big elements about the speech of the President in June last year was the NPA and the shake-up of that institution, and more importantly for the President was the announcement of Shamila Batoy to lead that institution. How would you assess its work thus far? Is it really coming together?
Well, Shamila Batoy has now been in office, for more than a year. Most importantly, she has also gotten the investigative director of Hermione Cronje. But we are yet to see any senior government officials arrested. And I think that is going to be on the minds of everybody. Now, of course, the President cannot interfere in law enforcement. He has to allow law enforcement agencies to do their work. So we have to come back to look at the state of these institutions. Let's look at the state of the NPA. Let's look at the state of the Hawks, all of whom, by the way, Koli, has new heads. So you have to tip your hat to Ramaphosa for doing that. But appointing the right people to very broken institutions that were captured is the beginning of the process. It's not the totality of the process. So you see Shamila Batoy being hamstrung by, a lack of skills. Some people that were actually part of the state capture project that is still in the institution. So she's kind of having to do her work with one hand tied behind her back, because that is just the pace at which democracy actually works. Reform isn't always, abled by democracy. Karima, it actually slows things down.
I want to also touch on the Hawks whilst we are on the law enforcement agencies. The Hawks, again, the talk there has been the lack of capacity and the push to try and have them capacitated. The President's words constantly is that we need to have a state that is capable, and therefore to do that you need to embolden it by appointing people with the right skills in the right positions. Is that happening?
I think appointing General Lebeya was a good start, but like I said, you can't think that appointing General Lebeya is magically going to fix the Hawks. The Hawks was hollowed out at provincial level, so your provincial heads are important, like with the NPA. For example, in the NPA's case, you have Moiponi Noko, the one NPA head that magically made friends of President Jacob Zuma's dockets, disappear and go after the critics of the administration. She has now been moved to the Northwest, and we know the Northwest is a province mired in corruption. We need action on a whole range of things, and yet cases are being, still taking very, very slow. So I think that just appointing heads is not the answer. You need to fix middle management, but also you need the synergy between the Hawks and the NPA to work better. So in my preparation for this interview, I just did a random check with the NPA about, for example, the matter of the Pierre-Nif painting that apparently got lost, as former Premier for the Free State, Ace Magashule, was now the the Secretary General of the ANC, where that case is at, because it's alleged that painting disappeared. My understanding is that the Hawks have completed the investigation. They have handed the docket over to the NPA. The matter has been set down for March. We don't know if Mr. Magashule is going to be charged, but we do know that the NPA is going to be making applications that the case move to the High Court. So there is a lot of work that is being done behind the scenes, but they have to manage the perception. If the process is seen to be politically motivated, Cyril Ramaphosa can lose his edge, because he will then be accused of going after his opponents politically. So these law enforcement agencies, broken as they are, struggling as they are, need to be left to do their jobs. But as citizens, I think we need to urge President Ramaphosa to get the officials that he's appointed to do their jobs on time.
Let's talk about the other institutions, Karima, of the state and state-owned enterprises. The most relevant one at this stage, or the most precious one, perhaps, is Eskom.
Absolutely.
Eskom has just lost in court. Well, the argument is that it was purely the urgency of the matter or not. But it is the finance minister's biggest headache, because if these tariffs are not approved in court, it means that Eskom still has a gaping hole. What do you foresee happening going forward, particularly with the talk around the PIC funds?
You know, Clearly, the problem with all political leaders, from President Nelson Mandela, who of course was released 30 years ago, to this day and made his speech on the parade, the problem with them is they don't understand the definition of priorities. You can't have 10 priorities. A priority is one thing. And I want the President to have one thing as a priority on Thursday. And that's not Eskom, it must be energy. Because without energy, the economy can't function. Eskom is one element of that. Now, if you just look at the last 3 days or 4 days, the different messages that have come from the energy minister and the president on the issue of Eskom, it appears as if Mr. Gwedemantashe is not sitting in the same cabinet meeting that the president is, of course, chairing, because he is saying something completely different. We saw him spring the idea of an alternative to Eskom at the mining in we see that that happens whilst the president has, together with his allies in NEDLAC, hammered out an agreement, brought business on board to look at how Eskom is going to be saved through using government employee pension funds and private savings. What Cyril Ramaphosa needs to do is to wield the power that he has, because he does have his hand on the levers of power. He needs to wield it now, and he needs to wield it in such a way that demonstrates that the decisions that he took at the Lekgotla of the ANC, which he allowed the media into unprecedentedly, is that he's the man in charge, and that every minister who's not on his hymn book needs to get in line. We need to see the president in charge. His popularity is way ahead of his party, and that should give him the courage to be bold and to be decisive.
Fortunately, time is against us. I would have wanted to touch on that survey that talks about his approval rating standing at somewhat 64.
Despite the lights not being on sometimes.
It's very, very interesting indeed. It'll be interesting to hear who was polled exactly. Karima Brown, thank you very much. And talking about the president needing to be decisive and modelling his presidency around that of Nelson Mandela, who we are told understood his power. But perhaps I'm running away with us here.